In this step, we are going to look at a recent news story and consider what the research question is, or questions are, that lie behind it. The headline in question came out in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks by Daesh in Paris in November 2015 and appeared in the Sun newspaper. 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadis. The headline reports the results of a survey of Muslims conducted by the polling company Survation. Let's think about a few assumptions that are required to make this story scary and worthy of a front page in the Sun. The first is that jihadis are defined in some way as a scary, bad thing. That, at least, is implied by a front page image of a Muslim woman holding a knife. That may seem like a reasonable assumption, but let's consider how jihad is actually defined. A quick internet search took me to a definition of jihad from the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary. 1. A spiritual struggle within yourself to stop yourself breaking religious and moral laws. And 2. A holy war fought by Muslims to defend Islam. Under the second definition, the Sun's depiction of jihadi may be justified, although even then many Islamic scholars question whether you need violence to fight a holy war. But under the first definition, the meaning behind the question becomes a bit more questionable. It would be sensible to ask about how the question was phrased. Was it specified whether the jihadis in question were following a violent version of the definition above? The second assumption is that this 1 in 5 figure is higher than that of the general population. Whilst this isn't necessary for the headline to be factually accurate, it is necessary for the implication of the headline, that Muslims in the UK are highly radicalised, to apply. Here, it would be necessary to survey a group of non-Muslims to ask what their opinions of jihadis are. But here we hit a problem. What if non-Muslims' understanding of the word jihadi is different to that of Muslims? We might expect this to be the case. A Muslim may have been taught the first definition of jihad through their mosques or through their families. For many non-Muslims, their main exposure of the word is through the press, who mostly use the second definition of jihad. If we were to survey both Muslims and non-Muslims, we would need to come up with a way of making sure that both groups were talking about the same thing. We might give a description of an example jihadi, for instance. Unfortunately for this question, no such reference group was mentioned by the Sun. So what was the question that respondents to the survey were actually asked? It was this: which of these statements do you most agree with? 1. I have a lot of sympathy for young Muslims who leave the UK to join fighters in Syria. 2. I have some sympathy for young Muslims who leave the UK to join fighters in Syria. And 3. I have no sympathy for young Muslims who leave the UK to join fighters in Syria. Let's stop for a moment. At no point does the question say anything about jihadis. The question doesn't say that the Muslims in question are going to do any fighting. It doesn't say what side the Muslims in question would be fighting on. Finally, sympathy is not the same as support. I have sympathy for young people who have been brainwashed into doing terrible things, whilst not supporting them in doing so. Had I been asked this question by a pollster, I would probably have given the second option for this reason. This is a great example of research where the methods being used do not match the research question, because the research question was poorly defined beforehand. Was this research about terrorists or freedom fighters? Brainwashed children or evil murderers? And it was never considered how Muslims compared to a reference category, that is, non-Muslims. So next time you are looking at news that reports a survey, try to dig a little bit deeper and find where the results come from. Think about what the question is behind the research and whether the headline and the implications behind it really match the research question that underpinned the survey.